After more than 4 billion years in one of the coldest regions of the solar system, this moon should have reached the simplest possible ending. Every layer of water should have frozen. Every trace of motion should have stopped. The surface certainly looks the part. Europa is locked beneath an ancient shell of ice. Temperatures plunge to around minus 170 degrees Celsius. Sunlight arrives weekly, more than 5 times farther from the sun than Earth. By every ordinary expectation, this should be a world where freezing finished a very long time ago. But it did not. Beneath that frozen surface, a global ocean still exists today. Not scattered pockets of meltwater. Not a temporary reservoir trapped by chance. An ocean wrapping around the entire moon beneath the ice. Those two realities stand together. An exterior that appears completely frozen. An interior that remains liquid. The contradiction is not an interpretation. It is the starting point. At first, the surface encourages the wrong conclusion. From orbit, Europa resembles a silent sphere of cracked ice. There are no open seas, no exposed water, no atmosphere thick enough to soften the brutal cold. Everything visible supports the same expectation. The moon froze. Then a spacecraft passed through Jupiter's magnetic environment carrying an instrument designed for something else entirely. A long magnetometer boom measured the invisible magnetic field surrounding Europa during repeated close flybys. The numbers refused to behave. As Jupiter's powerful magnetic field swept across the moon, Europa produced a second magnetic response. The signal shifted with Jupiter's changing field. It appeared again, then again. Different flybys, same behavior. A solid block of ice could not produce that response. The measurements required a vast, electrically conducting layer beneath the surface. At Europa's depth, only one known material matched the required conductivity. A global layer of salty liquid water. The frozen world was no longer completely frozen. One unusual measurement might still invite doubt. But the spacecraft returned. Each close pass through Jupiter's magnetic field produced the same pattern. The magnetic response remained synchronized with the changing field surrounding the moon. The signal was repeatable, consistent, independent of a single encounter. The hidden ocean stopped being a possibility. It became part of Europa's documented physical reality. The ice shell still covered the moon exactly as before. Nothing about its appearance had changed. Only its meaning had. Beneath that ancient frozen surface, an entire ocean had survived where every ordinary expectation said none should exist. One question remained. If the ocean is still there today, why did freezing ever stop? A hidden ocean can survive for a while on leftover heat. That seems reasonable. Every newly formed world begins hot. Rock and ice trap energy from their violent birth. If enough of that heat remained deep inside Europa, perhaps the ocean simply never finished cooling. It is the first explanation almost anyone would choose. Then time enters the picture. Europa is not a young moon. It has existed for roughly 4.5 billion years. That span of time changes everything. Thermal evolution models ask a simple question. If Europa received no fresh source of energy after its formation, how long would its original heat continue protecting a global ocean beneath the ice? The answer is measured in tens of millions of years, not billions. Long before the present day, the remaining warmth would have escaped through the ice into space. The liquid layer would steadily freeze from above and below until the entire moon became a solid mass of ice surrounding rock. The calculations end the same way every time. Without continuous energy, freezing wins. The ancient heat that once seemed sufficient suddenly becomes far too small. The frozen surface above offers no objection. It has spent billions of years radiating energy into the darkness of space. Every year removes a little more warmth. Every million years continues the same exchange. Nothing about that process ever pauses. If the ocean still exists today, something must have been replacing what space continually carried away. The problem is no longer explaining why Europa was once warm. The problem is explaining why it never finished cooling. That difference transforms the mystery. A surviving ocean is no longer evidence that heat once existed. It becomes evidence that heat is still being generated. The ice shell returns. From a distance, it still looks like the final stage of freezing. Yet beneath that ancient crust, liquid water has outlived the only simple explanation that could have sustained it. Whatever keeps the ocean alive did not happen once in the distant past. It has been happening again and again for billions of years. The next question is no longer whether Europa possesses energy. It is where that energy is coming from. The ocean still exists. Continuous energy is now the only explanation left. The search returns to the object that seemed to settle the question from the beginning. Europa's ice shell. Seen from orbit, it is anything but smooth. Dark lines stretch for thousands of kilometers. Broad bands cut across older terrain. Giant curved fractures weave across the surface like chains laid over a frozen globe. At first, they resemble scars left by an ancient catastrophe. But the geometry refuses to stay in the past. Some fractures sweep across the surface in graceful arcs. Others intersect at angles that repeat over immense distances. Their shapes are too organized to be random, too widespread to belong to isolated impacts. They follow patterns that can be mapped across much of the moon. The frozen shell is no longer behaving like silent scenery. It is recording something. A simple explanation comes first. Perhaps the cracks formed as Europa gradually cooled. Ice contracts. Stress builds. Eventually, the surface breaks. That process is familiar. It happens on Earth. It happens anywhere materials lose heat. But these fractures do not match the pattern left by a world that merely shrank as it cooled. Their curved paths trace changing directions of stress. The arcs fit repeated cycles of tension rather than a single episode of contraction. Models based only on long-term cooling cannot reproduce their distinctive geometry. Something has been pulling on the ice, then releasing it, then pulling again. The same frozen shell that once appeared to prove complete stillness now preserves evidence of repeated motion. Large regions show widespread tectonic disruption. Long ridges separate blocks of older terrain. Broad bands appear to have opened, shifted, and closed again. Across the surface, impact craters are surprisingly scarce. An ancient moon should carry the accumulated record of countless collisions. Europa does not. Its surface has been renewed often enough to erase much of that history. The fractures are not relics from a brief event billions of years ago. They belong to a world that has remained geologically active over immense spans of time. The ice shell returns once more. It looks exactly as it did at the beginning of the investigation. White. Broken. Frozen. Only now it no longer speaks of a dead ocean sealed beneath ancient ice. Every sweeping fracture has become part of a physical record showing that forces from below have continued shaping the surface long after the moon should have become completely rigid. The question changes again. If something has been deforming an entire frozen moon for billions of years, what force has been supplying that energy all along? The search for Europa's energy does not begin inside the moon. It begins with its orbit. Seen from a distance, Europa appears to circle Jupiter with quiet precision. Nothing in that motion suggests a hidden source of heat. A stable orbit should gradually become more circular over time, reducing internal stress until the moon settles into mechanical calm. Europa never reaches that calm. Its path remains slightly eccentric. The difference is small. It is enough. That slight departure from a perfect circle is not an accident. It is preserved by a permanent gravitational relationship shared with two neighboring moons. For every orbit completed by Ganymede, Europa completes 2. During that same interval, Io completes 4. This repeating pattern, known as the Laplace resonance, continually prevents Europa's orbit from becoming perfectly circular. The orbit never finishes relaxing. Every journey around Jupiter repeats the same cycle. As Europa moves closer to the giant planet, Jupiter's gravity pulls harder. A little farther away, the pull weakens. The entire moon changes shape in response. It stretches. It relaxes. Then it stretches again. The deformation is not confined to the surface. Rock deep inside the moon bends. Ice above it flexes. The hidden ocean shifts between them. A tidal bulge rises by as much as 30 meters before slowly changing again during the next orbit. Nothing snaps instantly. Nothing explodes. The movement is slow, relentless. Solid materials do not deform forever without consequence. Each cycle forces minerals within the rocky interior to slide against one another. Layers of ice deform under constant stress. Mechanical energy from Europa's changing orbit is converted into heat through internal friction. The moon is not preserving ancient warmth. It is manufacturing new warmth every orbit. The source of that energy does not originate beneath the ice. It arrives through gravity. The orbital motion itself becomes the fuel. One explanation is still not enough. Any mechanism can sound convincing in isolation. It must also agree with everything already observed. The magnetic measurements still require a global conducting ocean. The fractured surface still records repeated deformation. The thermal models still demand a continuous supply of energy. Now the orbital mechanics produce exactly that supply. Independent observations made by different instruments studying different parts of the moon begin pointing toward the same physical process. The frozen shell, the hidden ocean, the changing orbit. They no longer belong to separate mysteries. They are becoming parts of one planetary system. One question remains. Can that system truly keep an ocean alive for billions of years without ever allowing freezing to finish? A continuous source of heat solves only half the problem. Heat can keep an ocean liquid. Too much heat would melt the ice above it. Too little would allow freezing to continue. Europa has avoided both outcomes for billions of years. That balance becomes the final piece of the investigation. The heat generated inside the moon never remains trapped forever. It steadily moves upward through the layers above. The fractured ice shell conducts part of that energy toward the surface, where it radiates into the vacuum of space. At the same time, every orbit around Jupiter generates new internal heat through tidal deformation. One process removes energy. The other replaces it. Neither wins. Thermal models show that this long-term balance prevents Europa from reaching either extreme. The moon does not accumulate unlimited heat. It does not surrender all of its warmth to space. Internal energy generation closely matches the energy escaping through the ice shell. The frozen surface is no longer the final stage of cooling. It is part of the mechanism that controls the cooling. The ice shell returns one last time. From orbit, it has not changed since the opening moments of this investigation. The same bright plains. The same dark fractures. The same frozen crust. Only its role is different. Those fractures record repeated tidal deformation. The ice itself slows the escape of heat from the ocean below. It forms the outer boundary of a system that has remained active over geological time, preserving liquid water beneath while allowing the surface to remain one of the coldest places in the solar system. Every major observation now points to the same conclusion. The magnetic measurements require a global layer of salty liquid water. The surface fractures record continuous mechanical deformation. The orbital resonance supplies a permanent source of mechanical energy. Thermal evolution models show that continuous heating balances continuous cooling. None of these observations alone explains Europa. Together, they do. The contradiction that opened this investigation disappears. Europa never escaped the laws of physics. The original assumption was incomplete. Extreme cold does not guarantee complete freezing. Freezing depends on whether heat is lost faster than it is replaced. On Europa, Jupiter's gravity continuously deforms the moon through its stable orbital resonance. Internal friction transforms that mechanical energy into heat. The fractured ice shell regulates how that heat escapes into space. For more than 4 billion years, those processes have remained in balance, preventing the hidden ocean from ever freezing solid. The same frozen surface that first appeared to be proof of a dead world is, in the end, the strongest physical record that the ocean beneath it never stopped surviving.